What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back for another album review for you guys. Yeah, I'm a day behind doing the reviews. That was because yesterday I was out of town all day and then took a nap, and then by the time I woke up, it was podcast time, so I didn't have the time to do this video until now, but I am here to give you guys my review of the 15th studio album from Quebec prog speed thrash metal legends Voivod and their new album Synchro Anarchy. So, brief little history lesson of Voivod for you guys. Voivod formed all the way back in around 1982 out of Quebec. I cannot pronounce the name of their hometown because I don't speak French. But they're from the Quebec metal scene. They were really the pioneers of the whole Quebec metal scene that would eventually see bands later down the line like Gorguts and Cryptopsy and Martyr and Despised Icon, Cathelist, among many others. Voivod are seen as godfathers of the Quebec extreme metal scene. And early on, very much a speed metal band with moments of thrash on their first few albums like Roar and War and Pain. And then starting with Killing Technology, you started to kind of hear where they would eventually go into the world of progressive metal. And especially on albums like Dimension Hatros and even more on Nothing Face. But here we are with their 15th studio album, Synchro Anarchy. So we kick things off with Paranormalum and Paranormalium. I think that sounds better. Starts off with this like nice and slow build-up riff with some cool squeals to kind of set the mood for the song. Intensity picks up in the riffing as well as the song getting into a cool groove. And you're going to notice me say the word groove a lot because there's a lot of groove going on throughout this entire record. The chorus has some of that thrashy, punky vibes going on with the speed, but with the strange atmosphere plastered on top. The bass is really present on here as well, and even a quick fire lead before it gets into this weird kind of spoken word section to kind of create a more murky feel. Some Mr. Bungle vibes going on during this track, and I also really love the proggy breakdown towards the end of the song. So right off the bat, with the opening track, we're in for some weird shit right here. Then we get into the title track, Synchro Anarchy, classic Voivod riffing and some pulse-pounding bass line going on to get things started here. Love the drum work on this song quite a bit. But then again, I love the drum work throughout this entire album. I'll just go ahead and say it. Some quick, odd time signature shifts here and there on the chorus, and even those time shifts continue in another awesome prog breakdown. The song calms down just a little bit afterwards as the vocals begin to kind of carry this like soothing feeling forth, and it builds up to the lead section, and it's a very trippy lead, almost Pink Floyd levels of trippy weirdness. And the speed even picks up a little bit here towards the end to kind of get back to that like speedy thrash vibe. Excuse me. Then we get into Planet Eaters right off the bat with more of the killer groove that you heard on the opening track, but this track definitely grooves quite well throughout the entire track. Chorus coming in early, but it maintains that groove throughout. And as it ends, it gets thrashy for a brief moment before it settles back into that groove. And I'll just go ahead and say, like, all the grooves going on throughout this entire album kind of remind me of, like, Black Sabbath, Danzig, and Celtic Frost a little bit. The riff work and time shifts in the bridge section of this track is really going, like, nuts and chaotic at times. Afterwards, the song gradually builds itself up as it's steadily, like, gradually getting faster and faster and faster into an awesome double bass and guitar gallop, which kind of reminds you a little bit of, like, Iron Maiden at times. After that, some sci-fi atmospheric clean guitars can be heard faintly in the background. And then that gallop returns with a tasty lead to close things off for this track. Mind Clock, which is probably one of my favorites off of the album, starting off with some dark and sinister clean guitars. excuse me, to kind of get things off to a bit more of like an evil start. Similar to Slayer, like a calm Slayer beginning, kind of like Dead Skid Mask or 213, or even Spill the Blood, kind of something along those lines. And this dark build-up was executed quite well as the drums and electric guitars gradually enter the fray, and then things get really thrashy and frantic in a big way, and even the drums kind of getting into some black metal blast beat territory, which even this section kind of reminded me of something Time Ghoul would have done, where it gets a little bit frantic and almost black metal-esque. One of my favorite moments of the album so far was that fast-paced, almost black metal section. Afterwards, things slow down a little bit as that dark atmosphere returns. The thrashy vibe comes back in full force with back into that nice groove that I've been talking about. And then even as the song slowly or gradually slows down, builds up into the lead section, which helps pick the speed up a little bit further. And that dark atmosphere comes back as the song fades back into those sinister, clean guitars from the beginning of the song to conclude this track. And I love how this was actually, I think, the longest track of the album at about 6.5 minutes, and it just covered like almost every trick in the playbook of Voivod. The progginess, the speed, the thrash, but even throwing in some curveballs, like a little bit of black metal in there, or even some like weird tech death moments as well. Sleeves Off, which not a big fan of that title personally, but the song, it's the shortest song of the album, a little over 4 minutes. Thing in this song's a little bit more upbeat, and it feels like something from like the early days of Voivod, like that classic speed metal madness that we love about like the first 2 or 3 or even 4 Voivod albums. And it even has a little bit more of that punky vibe that you got from the opening track. Love the dynamic shifts going on with the guitars as well. Then again, you hear a lot of them dynamic shifts throughout the entire album. The lead section here has some technicality going for it, which I love, as it starts off almost with this like strange talk box tone. I don't know what you would call that tone, but it's not with like a talk box. It kind of sounds something like that. The speed remains in that like punky speed metal territory throughout until the very end of the track. Holographic Thinking, now this is another favorite of mine off of this album. The opening riff, very much reminiscent of Children of the Grave by Black Sabbath, and even the groove that it follows feels like almost like part 2 of Children of the Grave by Black Sabbath, leading into the vocals. And even the vocals, like Snake, it's like he's kind of channeling a little bit of like Mr. Bungle type Mike Patton and Ozzy Osbourne kind of in one. It's really weird, but Snake does a good job with the weird vocals on this track. Some of the catchiest riffs and grooves are heard on this song. The guitars are even going to town throughout the entire track. And then we even get into a section that feels like something Opeth would have done. It almost felt like a section I heard from Demon of the Fall. Once you hear like the beginning of Demon of the Fall and then this section of the song, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. After that, awesome drum and guitar build into the bridge section, and then even a dark, sinister lead coming in that feels like something Tony Iommi would have probably pulled off. And it was so wonderfully done, too. And then once again, the speed picks up as the drums and guitars are just going nuts at the end of this song. Then we get into The World Today, starting off with some awesome bass flurry going on while the guitars are kind of providing more atmospheric passages as opposed to like riffs, kind of more trying to provide an atmosphere, as the bass is pretty much the centric instrument of this track, but the guitars and the drums have their moments of shine as well. And the speed's up here on this song, and it feels like Ravenous Medicine Part 2, like something off of Killing Technology. And already getting a lead section like not even 2 minutes into the song, and it has a great mix of technicality and feel to it. One of the best leads of the album for sure. And I love how, and like I said, I love how the bass is pretty much like front and center, like demands your attention throughout. Then we get into Quest for Nothing, which has some awesome build-up to begin things off, as it's setting up for something impactful, and then some fast picking on the guitars, great double bass work on the drums, and the guitars provide this embellishment of a battle commencing in space, like Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker, and this is playing in the background. The speed stays up throughout the entire track as it once again goes back to that classic era, the mid-80s era of Voivod. And the track definitely has some vibes of like the Nothing Face era a little bit. Another quirky lead to add more to that weirdness that's going on. And some acoustic guitars can be heard faintly in the background as the song is drawn to a close through a bit of an epic yet sinister feel. And then to the closing track, Memory Failure. I love how the guitars and the drums just already punch you in the face to get things going here. And again, more vibes of the Nothing Face era of the band. The atmosphere this track has feels like a final battle of a sci-fi film. And as we enter the chorus, things get quirky once again with the instrumentation and the atmosphere. The bridge shows a bit, the bridge slows a bit to keep building more of that atmosphere before it gets fast and speedy. And even Snake's vocals in this section almost felt a little bit like Tom G. Warrior from Celtic Frost and Triptychon. Like he's getting a little gruffer towards the end of the song. And then another brilliant lead section starting off technical, but then concluding with more feel to it. And that's how we end things off. So overall, this is a weird album because there's a lot of quirky parts going on throughout. It goes all over the place. It goes into their prog style. It goes into that classic 80s speed metal vibe. Even gets thrashy at times. Lots of groove. Even in Mind Clock, getting a little bit techy and black metal a little bit with the black metal blast beat that you can hear in the verse, one of the verses of that track. But I mean, yeah, this almost feels like if Mr. Bungle, classic Voivod, and like the grooves of Sabbath, Celtic Frost, Danzig kind of meshed together with a little bit of a Pink Floyd trippiness to it, and you get this album. Now, personally, I've never been the biggest fan of Voivod, or, well, actually, I shouldn't say I wasn't ever the biggest fan. They're one of the least looked into bands for me. It's like, I know about their 80s work, and it's amazing, but kind of stopped paying attention to them after a while. But then when I heard this album was coming out, I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot, and I was not prepared for how weird this was, but how brilliant it was as well. Like, songwriting, yeah, it's kind of all over the place, but I kind of like that vibe that's going for, because it just adds to the weird atmosphere that this album is able to provide. The instrumentation is top-notch on this album. The drums are just insanely well performed. It's amazing how the drummer, Michel Away, even at almost 60 years old, is still able to play super fast. And then, of course, the bass. It's really like the bass. Like, in the production, I actually like the production. It feels well-produced, but it still feels raw and gritty. But every instrument and vocal pattern is heard pretty much evenly, even though maybe the guitars were a little bit quiet to the bass, just a tad. Like, you can definitely hear the bass all throughout, so just for props to the band for allowing the bass to kind of be more front and center throughout this album. But as far as what all I didn't like, really, I mean, I can't really find anything that I dislike about it really that much. Except for maybe whenever it kind of goes all over the place, it doesn't feel like... There are times when the transitions felt a little bit forced, I guess. I guess that'd be the only thing I could find to complain about. But other than that, these songs are just trippy and fun to listen to. This, again, another early contender for a top 20 spot in Album of the Year. I give this a 9.5 out of 10. This is some fantastic work from a band that's been going for 40 years now at this point. And I would recommend some of you guys who are stoners out there, probably get stoned to this album because you will get lost in your mind if you get stoned while listening to this. But even if you're not a stoner, you're definitely going to find some enjoyment out of this album for damn sure. But anyways, that does it for this review of Voivod Synchro Anarchy. What did you guys think of this album? Let me know in the comments below. And also, as I'm recording and this is uploaded, it's Super Bowl day. Go Bengals. Let's go Bengals. Who they think is going to beat them Bengals? But until next time, which tomorrow I should have my review for the new Amorphous album coming soon. But until then, horns high, and I will see you in the next one.
Yeah, so music, I think it was just kind of hearing like my parents listen to like just whatever they were listening to around the house, and like flipping through the music channels on TV. I'm not sure if you had what it was like in the US and things, but in the UK we had like a few channels like Kerrang, Scuzz, things like that, which would play your kind of anything kind of mainstream at the time, if you could say so. Like you would get Slipknot, System of a Down,
yes,
and loads of like Sum 41, Linkin Park, and all that kind of stuff.